On the Radar with the CBS 17 Storm Team.
Welcome to this week's On the Radar. I'm meteorologist Ross Whitley here with Rachel Dunsing. You're usually used to seeing her sit behind the desk and kind of be the interviewer, run the show over here. We thought since the last couple of weeks have kind of done this on this side that we would give Rachel the opportunity to be the nodding head over there and be able to explain some stuff for us, to be the interviewed expert as opposed to it being the other way around. Because let's just face it, you enjoy talking to her more than you enjoy talking to me.
Stop it. That's the whole point of On the Radar, is it's both of us chatting and explaining things. It's not one or the other. It's totally fine.
I don't know. We could poll the audience, or just go ahead and put the poll up that we absolutely don't have the ability to do, and you could just email us at rwhitley@cbs17.com, and then that way you can tell me just how bad I am at my job.
Oh, shush.
Anyways, we're going to talk about some of the current things that are going on. We're also going to talk about a little post-mortem on Imelda and Umberto. There's some neat and unique facts to this season alone, as well as those two storms, and we'll get to that in a second. We're going to talk some fall colors as well. That is a topic that Rachel and I are both pretty passionate about, along with the mountains, and we've got some pictures of the mountains, because that's where the fall color is going on at the current moment. And I think there was one more thing that we were going to talk about. Is that it? Let's see here.
Just a lot of hurricane facts.
A lot of tropical
that's what
stuff.
It was. We're still kind of in the heart of hurricane season, still technically have 2 full months to go, which means there's still 2 full months possibly of activity developing. And yes, we just had 2 hurricanes, possibly a few more areas to watch, which we'll get into. But yeah, people sometimes forget October, November is still hurricane season. We can still have a lot of pretty strong storms, which, again, the last time I was here with you on the radar, we talked about quite a bit with Michael. But we can still have some pretty feisty and strong, I almost said thunderstorms. That too, yeah. But
let's hope not.
Right, let's hope not. But hurricanes and tropical systems in October and November.
Yeah, and I think you hit it right on the nose there. There's certainly October, as we get toward the end of September and October, that's kind of scary season for hurricanes. Attention kind of shifts away from the Atlantic as we get later into October and more into the Caribbean and Gulf, and storms start to become a little more home-based, meaning coming off of cold fronts, that kind of stuff. But right as you said, start seeing fall color, you start getting a little chill in the air, and people think, we're done with that.
Yeah.
But in fact, if you go back to Thanksgiving Day, 1985, that's the last landfalling or latest landfalling hurricane. That was Hurricane Kate in 1985, and that was on Thanksgiving Day. So that was late November when a hurricane made landfall. And if you're wondering why or how I know that, it's because it made landfall in Panama City. So that would be the market that I was serving before coming here, which is why that random fact is in my brain. So yes, late landfalling hurricanes certainly possible all the way to the end of November. But you can see on the tropical activity map here, we are past peak and we should be trending down. However, this season has really been far from normal, especially as the numbers go. For the most part, we really haven't been seeing a whole lot of our typical type of activity, and we've got 2 areas of interest out there right now.
Yeah, we just saw that one very quickly coming off of Africa, what we call sort of the main development region. Sometimes we shorten it to the MDR. And those are what we typically expect to be the start of the longer track systems. So when they start in that far eastern part of the Atlantic, like you just saw there, it has more time to move over the warm waters of the Atlantic. It has more time to strengthen, to fight off any sort of growing pains or wind shear or dry dust or anything like that. Dry, dusty air. Yeah. Oh,
Dry dust. Dust is usually dry.
I know. Words are hard. I'm a Met major. I was not an English major. But basically all that to say, it has more time to strengthen. And not always, but most of the time when we see these really powerful, really devastating sort of long track systems, especially this time of year from September into October, they start out in that part of the Atlantic just because, again, it has more runway is another way we used to describe it as well. And then there's another one developing there sort of near the Bahamas, pretty low odds for development, only about 10%. But as we get into October, this is kind of more where we expect to see to see some things develop. Not so much that main development region, although it is still possible in October, but they start to be a little closer to home, so to speak, later in the season.
Yeah, I think we did our best with Umberto and Imelda last week. So if you're watching last week's On the Radar, you can go back and watch it, and you can see Wes and I are geniuses. I'm just kidding. We're not geniuses,
yes.
but we're definitely not geniuses. But we did get that right, and that was kind of an early prediction at that point in time when we were doing that. So it turned out a very tricky forecast, and we ended up getting that really right, which is impressive, especially with as weird as that setup was. This time around, I really don't think that anything is going to come of this. I don't know how you feel about it, but
yeah, if I were to lean anyway to something that we might see develop, it would be that one that's in more the eastern tropical Atlantic and not so much this one here off the coast. With that being said, you and I were talking off air. If anything gets into the Gulf, that is kind of a suspect area for development because we really haven't had anything in the Gulf. So the waters are still really, really warm. It's kind of untapped potential for...
Yeah, we're getting ready to see a map that's going to show exactly that. There's been nothing in the Gulf this year.
Nothing. And so if something were to develop and it kind of hits that perfect sweet spot of, no wind shear, no dry air, no dust, and obviously lots of untapped warm water in the Gulf, we could see something develop. So with this one, it doesn't really look like much could happen. Yeah. But if something does move into the Gulf at some point within the next few weeks, sometime this month, it might be something to watch. Not necessarily for us, but just for the Gulf Coast in general.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. The Gulf is very warm. This setup, not really all that great. And you kind of have a weak area of low pressure there off the back edge of a frontal boundary that just swept through and pushed what was left of Umberto and Imelda out to sea. And so this is just kind of one of those interacting between a very strong area of high pressure across the Gulf. So they're going to see some unsettled conditions down there a lot of this week. And that's going to lead to dry, breezy conditions for us all this week, which is what we're enjoying. As of October 2nd, today, it's just gorgeous outside.
Stunning. I didn't want to come inside because it was just so beautiful out there. Actually feeling like fall for once.
Yeah, these are the days that you're like, I have to go to work.
I know.
Like, I actually have to go inside to work. I'm never jealous of construction workers or anything like that outside in the heat, especially in the summer. Or when it's rainy and wet.
Yeah.
But when the weather is like this, I'm just like, man, I wish I had a job
I know.
outside.
They've got it going.
Yeah, they're doing it right.
Right.
We got to trade some spaces here. But yes, I don't think much is going to happen here. As Rachel said, that one out in the main development region, give it 4 or 5 days. It's going to get into some better conditions, and it's going to be one to watch. If it can kind of sneak under that subtropical ridge and work closer into the Caribbean or possibly even into the Gulf or around the Bahamas, then we could be talking about some issues with that. More than likely, it probably gets pulled north by some kind of weakness in that subtropical ridge, catches an upper level low or an upper level trough and gets pulled off to the north. That's the most likely scenario with that, even if it does develop. But that odd chance that ends up further south and misses those troughs and those incoming boundaries, then that could really be something to watch, especially as it gets further west. But as Rachel was saying, I think that you going later into the season, Caribbean and Gulf, that's where you're really paying attention. We get into these gyre type of circulations down there, and that's when we really start to watch for stuff into the Gulf. And typically anything that's in the Caribbean or Gulf, that's trouble for the U.S. in general because it only has one place to go. It's going to go north or it's going to go northwest, and the in its way is landmass. So as a meteorologist, we're never fans of storms that have land in front of them.
No, of course not.
Yeah. So, and unfortunately, when it's in the Caribbean or Gulf, it's kind of surrounded by land. There's only one place that it can go. And I'll look at the preseason numbers. We've only had we have 9 storms so far. We have had 4 hurricanes, and it looks like we might be on pace for average 14 named storms, 7 hurricanes. We've had 4 so far, so I think that we could get to the average, which means we need about 3 or 4 more storms of each to make that. So maybe we miss out on hurricane numbers, and we get to the average by number of named storms. Majors, we're already at the average.
I was just about ready to say, we have already had 3 major hurricanes. At one point, it seemed like every hurricane that we were going to have was destined to become a major hurricane. Fortunately, that stopped with Imelda, but still a Category 2 hurricane as it moved pretty much over Bermuda, or at least very close. That's still a very powerful hurricane, but you had Umberto, which strengthened to a Category 5. You had Aaron, which was the first hurricane and first Category 5 of the season, and Gabrielle didn't quite make Cat 5, but it was still a major hurricane. It was a Category 4. Remember, major hurricane 3, 4, or 5. So it really seemed like every storm that we were going to have, or every hurricane, was just bound to rapidly intensify into something crazy, which for most of them did happen. Imelda fortunately didn't become a major hurricane, but a hurricane nonetheless.
Yeah, and Imelda and Umberto did some odd things.
Yeah, they interacted with each other in weird ways.
Yes, they did. And it's been an odd season overall. I mean, most anything that has affected the U.S. at this point in time has been a weak tropical storm. Of course, Aaron being a strong system, impacting the East Coast U.S. with storm surge as well as, unfortunately, beach erosion. You add in the following storms that have happened since that have all been Atlantic East Coast side, and you're increasing beach erosion, you're increasing that swell issue along the coast.
Yeah.
We've seen the result of that with those 2 storms being pretty close to the East Coast, Umberto and Imelda. Unfortunately, a place that you went to just recently, showing some of those homes being lost to the sea with the beach erosion. So the Outer Banks is what we're talking about. And, you know, that's unfortunately, even when these storms don't have an impact directly, they still have an impact.
Right, and people, I think, sometimes forget that. And in speaking with, the National Weather Service and National Hurricane Center in the past few years, they're really trying to hit home the fact that distant hurricanes can still be deadly in their own way. A lot of times for people who go to the beach, it's in the form of dangerous rip currents. Think, oh, that hurricane's hundreds of miles away, it's going to be fine, I can still have my beach trip. And yes, you can, still bring money and business to the Outer Banks and all those wonderful, local businesses and places like that. But it's not always safe to get in the water because you have that increased risk of rip currents. You have the higher waves. You have that coastal erosion as these strong waves move on shore. You and I both haven't necessarily met them personally, but there's a great meteorologist, and he does a lot of research and forecasting. Levi Cowan runs the website Tropical Tidbits. I'm sure a lot of people know about that. And he said something a number of years ago that has always stuck with me, and is water has memory. So if you have, and I always use the analogy of kids playing in a pool. So if you have a major hurricane, 3, 4, or 5, that is a powerful hurricane. That's a lot of wind. That's a lot of high waves. But if it starts to weaken, those waves don't instantly go calm. The water doesn't instantly go calm. You're playing in the pool, a pool party as a kid. Everyone has to get out for lunch. Nothing goes calm immediately. It takes some time for all of those waves to sort of calm down. And it's the exact same thing with hurricanes. So just because it goes from a 5 down to, say, a 2 doesn't mean the waves are going to instantly go down. They're still going to be high. They're still going to work towards the coast, especially for these storms that have been kind of moving up along the East Coast. And it's still going to cause some issues. And coastal erosion is just part of it, in addition to the strong rip currents and high waves and all of that. So water has memory. Waves can travel a long way and still cause some impacts.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It brings up something we talked about last time you were on here, where we were talking to each other. Katrina has the Gulf Coast record for storm surge at 28 feet, which is
ridiculous.
Just mind-blowing.
Yeah.
But it made landfall not as a 5. Made landfall as a 3.
Yeah.
Most people think, oh, well, Katrina was a 5. Yeah, it was a 5 out in the middle of the Gulf, and it was a huge storm. It was massive from side to side, its overall coverage area. But it rapidly intensified up into a Category 5, and that strength is what built that storm surge. So even as it was coming ashore and weakening coming ashore, it brought all that water with it. And that's really part of its history of devastation, was not only the flooding it caused in New Orleans, but the storm surge it caused on the Mississippi coastline. 28 feet. That is nearly 3 stories tall. If you're looking at a high rise, it's almost the 3rd story. That is just...
And some of that went miles inland. I think it was, 6 miles inland for some of that storm surge. So
way up
it's
the river
ridiculous.
and way inland. So we're going to take a break, but when we come back, we're going to talk about something that you may have heard of over the last couple of weeks, and maybe it was for the first time. If you're a fan of the movies Twisters, then you probably heard it in that movie too. It's the Fujiwhara effect.
Fujiwhara. I didn't want to say because I didn't know if you wanted to give it away before break, but anyway.
No, I give it away. We're going to talk about Fujiwhara effect. What is it, and how did it play a role in Umberto and Imelda missing the East Coast? So we're going to have that when we return.
On the radar with the CBS 17 Storm Team.
Welcome back. I'm meteorologist Ross Whitley on CBS 17 Plus here with Rachel Dunsing. We've kind of switched roles. I'm running the operation here, and she's being the interviewed type of person, giving you the expert information on that side of the table. So always fun. We'll switch it back. We're gonna have fun.
What are these shows if not just to have fun and sort of switch things up? And it's the whole point. On the radar, new perspectives, all these things. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, we're trying to give you guys a little inclusivity of what we talk about on the daily basis, what's going on behind the air, and that kind of stuff. Because these are basically everything that comes up in these shows. There's stuff that we talked about during the week, and it's stuff like, hey, well, we should mention this, and we may not be able to get to it on air because we don't have that much time on
They
air.
give us 3 minutes.
Yeah, 3 minutes to talk about, and what is just crazy to me, 22 counties of weather here. So that's a big area to cover, and for the most part, we're just trying to slam it all in there, what's most important, and give you that information. So this is kind of more of an open forum that we can kind of talk about these bigger topics and discussion. So we started off the show talking about how I'm bad at my job, and now we're coming back into this, and I teased that we were going to talk about Fujiwhara effect. We are going to talk about that.
Yeah.
But we got one more topic to get to, so it was my fault. I'm the one that forgot that we had another topic to get to. We're still talking about the season, and you briefly mentioned it. It has been the season of rapid intensification. So let's look at that.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say is we did talk about it. So it's not that you're bad at your job. It's just like we did briefly mention it already. But, I mean, you went through the work and, went through the past few hurricane seasons and even all the way back to 2005 of, rapid intensification. This word has been thrown around a lot, especially over the past few years as we've seen more hurricanes rapidly intensify. It's a very specific parameter, Ross, and I believe it is 35 knots in 24 hours.
That's it. You got it.
So that's like 37 miles per hour-ish in a 24-hour period. So basically it goes from, point A to point B somewhere 37 miles per hour at minimum in a 24-hour period. That is rapid intensification. It's happened 3 times this year. 3 times, and we've only had 4 hurricanes.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is kind of crazy when you think about it, just how quickly a lot of these storms, and especially this most recent one, Umberto, I mean, it became a Category 1 like 5 a.m. on a Friday. And then, what was it, the next day it was a Category 5?
Yeah.
Something like that Saturday?
Yeah,
Ridiculous.
I think it was within like 20-something hours. We went from a 1 to a 5, which something Wes and I talked about with Helene last week, talking about the Category 5s. And this is something that should always stick in your mind, especially as you're dealing with hurricane prep. All Category 5s that have made landfall in the U.S. 3 days prior were tropical storms. All of them. Camille, Labor Day, Andrew, Michael. All tropical storms 3 days prior to landfall. So just because you're looking at something and the forecast intensity is blah, 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 it doesn't necessarily mean that that's what you should be prepared for. We always say that you should prepare for the category above what is being forecasted. And that is really a just-in-case scenario. But intensity forecasting, as good as we have gotten with everything else, and we've gotten really good at tracking, we've gotten really good at projecting out where things are going to go. Intensity forecasting is still one of those things that when things line up correctly, the models and us, we're going to get it wrong.
Yeah.
Because that's just a situation that in the atmosphere, when it lines up perfect, it's perfect. We saw it last year with Milton. Everybody knew that Milton was going to end up being a strong Category 4 or even a Category 5. And then what it did and the satellite presentation that it put on in the Gulf was just unbelievable. It had
nuts.
a tiny, tiny little eye. I think it was only 5 miles wide. And it dropped down to 901 millibars, which is such a low pressure. And then they had a recorded wind speed because they had hurricane hunters flying through it at that time, which was a little bit of luck because you're not always going to have current observation, but a little bit of luck flying through it at that time and then getting that wind speed up there, up over 180 miles an hour. So
a callback to something we did in the first block at the beginning. Wasn't Milton an October storm?
Milton was an October storm.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
again, we can still have crazy storms, crazy powerful hurricanes, even in October when we think the season is quote unquote winding down.
Yeah, that's
Again,
true.
Look
Yeah.
at Milton.
Yeah, and that was a Gulf storm. So
Also a callback to what we were talking about.
I hope we're
at the
not
beginning.
foreshadowing here because
Oh, I hope
again, we're just looking at things that have happened in the past and then just thinking about things that could happen in the future. And the Gulf is really untapped. And speaking of things in the past, you look at these seasons. These are all the other seasons, the only other seasons that have had 3 rapid intensification hurricanes. That's it. That's the total list. 2025, 2023, 2020, which was just a crazy season. 2017 and 2005. So roughly over the last 20 years, and you've had all of those that account for the rapid intensification 3 storms. And that's it. That's the total list. Now, some of that probably has to do with exactly what we were just talking about. Hurricane hunters, as well as the visibility of things today, is that we just see things better than we ever have. So it's possible that other seasons in the past reached that threshold as well. We just didn't either A, know the storm was that strong because it was way out to sea and our satellites weren't as good, or B, we just didn't have any observation. So it's possible, right?
Yeah.
So we're not saying that this is the entirety list across history. I know there's going to be people that complain about that. What
But
we're
at least
saying
in
is,
recent years.
yes. That's in recent years. And there's some memorable storms here. Delta, Laura, both made landfall about 30 miles apart in Louisiana, about 1 month apart.
Yeah.
That was crazy.
And I believe one of them was very close to the anniversary and location of Katrina, right?
Yes, very, very close.
I
Yeah.
think it might have been Delta. But
That
yeah.
was, Delta was closer because Delta was further off to the east. Laura
Right.
ended up being closer to Lake Charles.
Right. Right.
Yeah, so, but Delta was really close. It was still probably about 40 miles to the west, but still, yeah, it was close. Harvey, Irma, and Maria, all very memorable storms from 2017.
Yeah.
Harvey, obviously, 50 plus inches of rain in Texas in 3 days.
Yeah.
If that doesn't blow your mind, I don't know what will. That is most places annual rainfall in 3 days.
Yeah.
Irma, Category 5. Maria, a Category 5. Irma, thankfully, weakened before coming into the Keys. Maria, unfortunately, just destroyed Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
And then Katrina. I don't know why I was going to say Katarina. My brain.
Because
is-
there's Katrina and Rita right next to each other.
That's probably what it
Yeah,
was. Rita, a memorable storm too, because it just happened after, what was the I name storm that year?
Was it Ike?
Ike. That's
Ike.
it. You're right. Yes, it was
Yeah.
Ike. Good memory.
I don't know how I pulled that one out.
They had it. Ike. They did not evacuate. And
Right.
so for the response, Rita was shortly to follow that. And so they evacuated everything for Rita, which actually turned out to be an excellent call.
Right.
Because Rita was just a terrible storm. And then Wilma, thankfully, also much weaker at landfall, making landfall in Florida. But
In October.
in October, it set the record for rapid intensification
It did.
in the Atlantic Basin. It still holds that record.
It
So
does.
it went from tropical storm to a Category 5 in, I think, like 17 hours.
It was something stupid.
Yeah. I think it was
And I
like
mean that with
17
all due
hours.
respect. Sorry for using that phrase, I guess, but
Yeah.
it was ridiculous.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
really, really quick. And
Yeah.
we have talked way too long about this. So now we got to get to Fujiwhara. Oh, boy. All right. So I showed you this graphic last week. I showed it on air and I showed it I'm not quite sure. Yes, I did. I showed it in on the radar as well. I didn't really change this graphic. That was basically the scenario that I set up here, what became Imelda and then what was Umberto. And you can see the two tracks, and you're like, well, where's the Fujiwhara effect, and how did that actually play out here? Well, Fujiwhara effect, just simply put, is two areas of low pressure that move around a focal point. So when you think about that, these storms don't combine. They don't work and crash into each other. They rotate around each other. So it's like square dancing, basically. And if you're in the Southeast, you know what square dancing is. You grab your partner, spin them round and round, right? And when you're spinning round and round, you guys aren't clashing into each other. You're literally spinning around a
You're not
point.
supposed to.
Right. You're not supposed to anyways, unless you're not good at square dancing. And you know that when you let go, the person typically of smaller weight is usually the one that is flung out of that spinning round and round. And so the same thing happens in the atmosphere. The one that is stronger as far as lower pressure is typically the one pulling on the other. So in this case, we saw two Fujiwhara effects. The first one helped to stall and then pivot Imelda before it was able to really become anything. And then as we went further down the road, we had Umberto hit an upper level trough, start to weaken. Imelda became the stronger focal point and helped to actually stall and spin into Imelda. So Umberto was then spun into Imelda. Those both combined and then worked their way out to sea, which now, as of today, it's an extratropical low. So it's past Bermuda and did that. So we actually had two Fujiwhara effects happening there with that track. And that's excellent news, as you and I talked about last week, because if there hadn't have been Umberto, it's probably coming right here.
It really was, and that's why there was so much uncertainty with where Imelda could possibly go. And trust me, we all heard it. We all saw the comments on social media, and sometimes they're still showing up on like past information. I just got one the other day. Wow, great forecasting. But the whole point of
forecast change as we learn information.
Yeah, and I wanted to comment being like, you do realize this post is a week old. I digress. And that
controversy,
post,
you and I, man.
And
we're just always poking.
And that post didn't even say it was coming. It said there were forecast changes.
Just keep poking, Rachel. Just keep poking.
I have lots of feelings. Anyway, take a drink of water every time I said anyway. You'll be very hydrated. Anyway, Imelda was tricky to forecast, and everyone wanted to know where is it going to go, what's going to happen, because as we mentioned, it very well could have slammed into the southeastern United States, but there was just enough uncertainty due to Umberto that it could possibly pull it out or pull it out to sea, or any of these other forecasting changes. So it is incredibly tricky. We're very thankful that Umberto pulled Imelda out to sea and that both of these storms stayed away from us. But anytime you have two systems like this, it does make things incredibly complicated.
Yes, it does. So next time you hear Fujiwhara, you just think square dancing. Just spin your partner round and round.
There's a great analogy,
That's
Ross.
it. That's all you got to do. So you do the same thing next time you watch Twisters, because I know you're going to watch it again. It's an excellent movie. I loved it.
It is.
We have no time left. But last time I got challenged.
You did.
So I'm challenging you. You got like 30 seconds.
All right. So what we're looking at right now, wonderful people at Explore Fall are putting this information out there. You can see most of North Carolina. Too early to see any sort of color, even though you might be seeing some sort of tree stress going on and what looks like it's changing colors. But we're actually starting to see some patchy to partial color in the mountains, western North Carolina. And we have some beautiful photos coming in from the Grandfather Mountain Stewardship Foundation. The first one that kind of went through rather quickly, that was Forrest Gump Curve. But anyway, this is Linville Peak. The next one is Black Rock, I do believe. After that is just kind of a park road near Forrest Gump's curve. So you can start to see just a little bit of that patchy color showing up, and then a little bit earlier before that, not a lot of fall color, but just a beautiful view of the wildlife there in the mountains. And so we love to see that color. And as we get really in the next few weeks, we could see more of that color start to show up, not just here in the mountains, or not just in the mountains, but here at home as we get some cooler nights, nice sunny afternoons with temperatures staying in the 70s. I'm sure that was more than 30 seconds.
That
but
absolutely
I tried.
was. But since I put a timer on myself, I'm definitely putting a timer on you. You definitely went over 30 seconds. That is it for On the Radar this week. If you've got any information you want to send it to us, you can certainly do that at mine, Wes's, Rachel's, or Laura's emails. It's just our first letter, our last name, and then at cbs17.com. Make sure to send us these pictures. We love fall pictures. We love the mountains. We love the entire state. So even if you're seeing some fall color at the beach, I doubt it, but you could be. It's possible. That's going to do it for this week on The Radar. Make sure to catch us next week.